Welcome to Puddlecast, where we discuss safety, water, environment, and career development topics. Let's jump in.
Welcome to another Puddlecast. Today we are on the road and we are headed down to a stormwater conference for the next day here before I get on a flight and head to California to do some more video work and some conversation with a colleague down there. As we're driving along here, we've been noticing a lot of different vehicles that are on the road, and we've been talking about how to have conversations with some of the folks at the conference and some of the things that are changing in the industry. And I thought I'd take a little bit of time and talk about some of the challenges that we're faced with in our industry, and this is being the stormwater industry specifically, on some things that are sort of oxymorons or potentially contradictory, or things that we do that maybe aren't a net environmental benefit as we move forward here, as we're trying to solve all these problems. We have a permit that's coming out that's essentially redefining the definition of what transportation means, and transportation being vehicles that are essentially fleet vehicles, where that definition sort of used to sort of fence off who needed an industrial permit or not, were those that had fleet vehicles that did on-site maintenance and fueling on their facilities. And that definition now is sort of breaking that boundary and saying, if you have delivery trucks, or you have pieces of equipment or forklifts that are unloading and offloading things outside that are not completely undercover, you can qualify for the need of an industrial permit. And that's always been a struggle for a lot of, at least clients that I work with or people that I've heard in the trainings, that they have to do all of this work because they fit the transportation SIC, or North American Industrial Classification Code, and they need to do this transportation thing, but their neighbor who's just right next door, and they have fleet trucks also, they don't have to, because they don't trigger the on-site need for fueling, or they're not doing the maintenance activity on that piece of property. So this new definition is really going to open and crack a door to operations that historically haven't had to have coverage, but may now need to have coverage under a permit because they have decals on their trucks, or they have people that are coming onto their site and their forklifts are doing offloading and onloading of product or material as they move around. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic, and we know there's some stuff coming out of Southern California as well based on discharges to TMDLs, where businesses previously that didn't fit the multi-sector general permit or industrial stormwater permit classification may now be required to get permits because they discharge to a water body that has some sensitivities to it. And it's opening up, both of those things are really opening up the door for commercial spaces to start having to consider stormwater and having to put a plan together and put a best management practices in place to manage their piece of properties and potentially take samples. So that's sort of a new trend in the industry, and some of the other things that we've been doing that fit along that transportation category or are new considerations as we move forward here. We saw one of those Tesla trucks driving by, and we were talking about just, all of the materials that go into manufacturing of those, and they have a sustainable image, and they have we want to go to electric vehicles, but the cost of production and the diesel consumption of getting the raw materials to build that product, right now, we're not necessarily seeing that huge net environmental benefit, but just something driving down the road that's not going based on gas. So there's a lot of these type of circumstances where it's going to take a large infrastructure change, or a large change in society to really move these things, move the environmental needle forward when it comes to the implementation of different products or different environmental practices going forward. And we have the 6 ppdq. So if you don't know what that is, it's a chemical that has been found that comes off of tires. It's a tire wear chemical, and it is very lethal to salmonids and other fish species around the world. It's not just a US thing, it's not just a Northwest thing, this is actually a worldwide issue. And this 6 ppdq tire wear, even at very, very, very low levels, in parts per trillion levels, is lethal to certain types of fish. And so we found this chemical, and now we're starting to put a lot of policy making, and the tire manufacturing community is trying to figure out how they can actually make a tire without putting this chemistry in it, without the tire falling apart. There's that whole side of the house, and then there's the house that's trying to take this stuff back out of the environment. And frankly, if we even had a new chemistry that we could put into tires today, think about the number of tires that are out there and how many years it's going to take before we see a difference in taking that pollutant out of the environment. Even if we had a solution today, it would be years before we can get all of the existing tires off the road and put them onto some type of new tire. But that being put aside, we're trying to find treatment solutions. We're trying to find BMPs that are going to work at removing that pollutant out of the environment. And currently the science is supporting the fact that most of the 6 ppdq is adhered to fine particulate matter, that it's adhered to sediment and materials. And so the going thought right now is that we should increase our sweeping program. But if you think about that, you've got a sweeper truck that's putting carbon emissions out, and it's got tires as well, and it's running tire wear as it's doing what it needs to do to essentially pick up the same chemistry that it's laying down the chemistry that we're trying to pick up. So very affectionately, I have a lot of affection for a Vector truck or an inductor truck. I used to work on one. I've been in a lot of holes. I've had a lot of things crawling up my hip waders and stuff before. But it's also this sort of oxymoron driving down the road. It's this thing that we're using as a cleanup tool for our stormwater infrastructure. And to make it do its job, we fill it up with drinking water, treated water out of a hydrant, so that we can spray the drinking water into the stormwater system to remove the stormwater pollutants and the stormwater loading. It takes us about 15 to 20 minutes to fill that truck up, and then we're going to spend however long it takes, in some cases up to 3 hours, to drive from the point that we suck that material out to a decant facility, because we've called it process wastewater, and that's the only handling facility that can handle that process, while we're putting 6 ppdq and zinc and copper on the road from our brake pads and tire wear and carbon emissions to get to a place, because we've named the water something different. And I guess I'm doing a little bit of venting as we drive down the road, and these are the things that sort of possess my mind as I'm driving places and things. But at some point, we've got to start thinking in our industry about net environmental benefit, and are the policies and are the practices that we are looking at making an overall improvement, or are we just chasing things? Are we chasing one pollutant of concern, or are we chasing one practice to then figure out that years later that practice isn't necessarily the right approach? And some of these conversations are big in scale. It's not just about a permitted facility and every permitted facility doing their thing within their property boundary. It may be having to find ways of putting groups of things together, or look at watersheds or drainage basins, and having a much more complex, united effort, if you will, everywhere from our homes all the way to our industry. It's not really fair. It's not really right to say to just certain land use practices that they're the ones that are going to put the majority effort into managing for stormwater, when we can have an industrial site that's spent millions of dollars on a treatment system that's making very clean water, introduce that clean water into a MS4 infrastructure or into a drainage ditch, and downstream there's a neighbor that contributes to that same ditch, and as that water goes through that infrastructure and goes to the outfall, there's very little improvement to the outfall's water quality with all the effort that the industry put into it. And you can see story after story after story of these type of activities, and our regulatory groups are doing their best, and they're trying to define these categories of permittees. But again, our land use is growing. The number of people that are knowledgeable and also contributing to stormwater pollution continues to grow. And yet we seem to be sort of relying on the same set of permittees over and over again to keep enhancing their program and hoping that those enhancements of that group of people is going to make a net difference. And I'm not so sure that we can say that. I'm not sure that we can rely on the same number of permittees year after year after year and expect to see change at the end of the pipe. We're going to have to expand programs. We're going to have to have more people get involved, and whether that's a permitting mechanism or whether that's a municipal management system that has to go into place or a cooperative effort. I'm not so sure that the NPDES permit in and of itself, unless we start creating a whole bunch of sub permits, like you're seeing a lot of specialty permits. You have a derelict vessel NPDES permit, you have wineries permits. We're starting to see hemp growers potentially needing to get their own permits. So if we keep making new subcategory permits, maybe that's a pathway to do it, but there's still going to be this giant void space of responsibility and management across the landscape. And until we start to have a bridge of connecting all that stuff together and finding ways of sharing the cost, sharing the burden, understanding that, and this is so much more than just a permit, it's so much more than just a policy thing. This is sort of it's got to be a common goodwill, if you will. There's got to be a human aspect of this, that there's a desire to see change, that there's a desire to want to move things forward. And that's going to be hard to overcome. That's going to be a very difficult thing. The environment's never going to supersede profit, and it's never going to supersede people being in business. But we can all, if we, to me, and this is sort of a personal statement, if there were more people that knew about it and there were more people at least doing something, I feel like there would be a better benefit to the environment, better benefit to water quality than a handful of people doing a whole lot of stuff across the landscape. So those are just some thoughts, and those are some ideas that are out there, and people are trying to tackle this, but it's not an easy issue. It's a difficult issue, not only from a business standpoint, not only, nobody wants a stormwater permit, nobody wants to have a plan, nobody wants to learn this stuff, but it's also from a regulatory standpoint, it's very burdensome to these regulatory agencies to have to come up with new permits and then say things out of those permits and write things into the permits that then are going to be argued in court, and it takes time to do all these things. But again, I think a lot of our interest or a lot of our energy gets focused at these shiny things. We go out, we find these new pollutants of concern, or we go out and see these new BMPs or new technologies that are out there, and we tend to get distracted. It's like, what is that movie, like Squirrel, right? And the squirrel runs across the road, and we're all focused at the squirrel when we're still trying to figure out how to reduce turbidity off of construction activity, and that's been one of the longest standing permits that's been out there, and it's the one that's most well known around the world in terms of management. So it's maybe that we're not always having to try to find something new or trying to reduce a new pollutant level, but maybe we need to look at our existing systems. Maybe we need to look at how we're doing what we're doing, and are there improvements that can be made in management decisions, or are there improvements that can be made in collectively working together, or focusing at more of a holistic management rather than getting so finite into a certain area. So these are things that we talk about in committees. These are things that we're probably going to go here when we go down here to this conference, and people are speaking in seminars and stuff. But thought I would share this with y'all as we're driving down, and my wife has to listen to this kind of garbage all the time. She's got to listen to a whole bunch of stormwater things as we talk about, and watch me wave my hands and get red in the face. So anyway, it's never a boring, this is not a boring industry by any means. There's something new coming on all the time. There are new topics of conversation. There are new policies being made. And every time we do that, it's sort of a shakeup in redefining or refocusing our efforts on properties and with clients and on projects. So anyway, I hope, if you're ever interested in talking about any of these things, or you're wanting to share more ideas or share your thoughts, we have communities as part of the CWT Training Academy. And if you register for the CWT Training Academy, that doesn't mean buy a training course. That just means get on the academy and create a login account. It'll give you access to these communities, and in these communities is where we are sharing these type of ideas, or we're sharing, not just me or not just other industry experts that are chiming in, but it's also where you're getting this from your colleagues, and you can ask questions in there and get responses from people that are also dealing with similar things that you are in the industry. So it's a good place to share ideas. Again, always welcome to get a hold of us anytime, cwtacademy.com. And thanks for being a part of this Puddlecast and getting me down the road a little further.
Nate touched on some great points. I think net environmental improvement should definitely be something that you're always thinking about. We can't just be chasing our own tail. With the growing amount of businesses, we can't keep relying on the same amount of permittees. We need to start expanding subcategories and trying to introduce more permittees into the system. And remember, it's important to discuss new ideas that you may have with your network of colleagues. New ideas like changing the definition of what transportation means can greatly impact stormwater.
Thank you for listening to our Puddlecast today. Remember, you can always engage with us in our communities or get info from our blog and resource library at cwtacademy.com. That's cwtacademy.com. Follow us on social media to get the latest information and see what our team of instructors are up to. We hope you tune into the next Puddlecast, where we will discuss more water, safety, environmental, and career development topics. Catch you on the next one. Bye.